It's October, the spooky season. Halloween is next week. That means I'm in the mood to talk about horror movies. So today I'm going to stop and rank the 15 highest grossing horror movies of all time, from the worst to the best. As we go into this, be sure to share your ranking down below in the comment section. The list of movies is in the description. When it comes to horror, we're all gonna have a different definition of the genre and kind of set the boundaries in a different place. So I went and I picked a list off of Wikipedia. That's the list of movies I'm working from, except their list included the Hotel Transylvania movies, and 3 of them cracked the top 15, and I was like, nope, that's too far for me. That is outside of my bounds. So I kicked out the Hotel Transylvania movies, but that also meant I could include one of the mainline Conjuring films, which I wanted to do. But as we go into this, you're not gonna think that all of these movies qualify as a horror film. That's fine. One more thing before we get started. Today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you don't know my story, when I started this YouTube channel, I was unemployed and in alcohol treatment. My drinking problem stemmed from dealing with stress through drinking. I didn't know where to turn for help. Therapy could have helped me develop healthy coping skills. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Therapy is a safe place where you can share what's on your mind, whether it's stress, sadness, worries, or relationship issues, without fear of judgment. The therapist, a trained mental health professional, is there to listen, ask questions, and help you see things from a new perspective. They can provide insights and teach techniques to manage emotions, reduce stress, and make positive changes in your life. It's entirely online and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if that therapist isn't a great match for you, you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. If you're struggling and think you could benefit from therapy, click on the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/Sean Chandler and get 10% off your first month of therapy. The link is down below in the description, and let's get started. In last place, The Nun. It actually always shocks me just how financially successful this movie was, because in most conversations that I have in person and online, this is widely regarded as the worst or one of the worst movies in the Conjuring franchise, but it's also the movie that grossed the most money because it plays great globally. As for my personal opinion on the film, it does have a nice spooky atmosphere. We're off at this castle in the middle of nowhere, Romania, so it's eerie, but beyond that, I just don't think it has anything else to offer. It's a very drab movie where very little happens. These people travel to the castle and then they walk around as spooky things happen, and between scenes they're delivered exposition, or the backstory is dropped and told rather than shown. And so a movie that I've never cared for. I find it pretty boring. All it has to offer is atmosphere and jump scares, and I just find it truly baffling who they cast as the lead character in this movie. The star of the main Conjuring movies is Vera Farmiga, and they cast her sister as the star of The Nun, and they look like sisters. They look a lot alike, and there's no connection. So it's just baffling casting choice for a movie that I just don't really like. Number 14, Hannibal. This is a movie that I have never liked. I was in the theater opening night, very excited to see a follow-up to Silence of the Lambs from Ridley Scott, and it disappointed me when it came out over 20 years ago. It disappointed me when I rewatched it 4 years ago for the first time, and it disappointed me last night when I rewatched it in prep for this video, as well as my Ridley Scott ranking that's coming next month. And I think the issue here is that everything about the movie feels so different. And I understand that Jodie Foster didn't want to return. I like Julianne Moore as an actress, but I don't think she at any way feels like the same character that Jodie Foster was playing. Everything about her gives off a different vibe and an energy. The nature of the story, it's very convoluted, it's disjointed, and it's just kind of a nasty plot line where there's no one that you're really rooting for in this movie. And even the Hannibal Lecter character, what made him so fascinating in Silence of the Lambs as well as Manhunter is that you have this brilliant man that can control all the situations he's in, but he's the one locked up. And there's this interesting power dynamic that takes place in all of those sequences and what he's able to do. And watching him just kind of in the open, in the free, it's just simply not as interesting as what they did with the character in the previous two films where he appeared. And so a movie that I don't like the story they went with. I don't like the characters, how they're handled in the film. And almost it feels too stylized in the direction. It's got too much of that Scott energy in it. So I've just never cared for this film. Next up, Prometheus, another Ridley Scott movie where he's making a follow-up film in a franchise with movies that I adore, and another movie that seriously disappointed me, though I didn't actually see this movie in the theater because I had a newborn baby at the time, as well as it just being a busy season at work. But when I finally watched it at home, I was pretty shocked at how much I didn't enjoy the film. Now, on a watchability level, I find Prometheus much more watchable and entertaining on a superficial level than Hannibal. Some of that's just a genre thing that I love sci-fi, the world of Alien and Alien. So superficially, there's a lot of things in Prometheus that I can enjoy. But on a story level, thematic level, logical cohesiveness level, I just don't think this movie works at all. Where it's a film about really smart people making incredibly dumb choices. The only reason that the plot works, it plays out, that all the horrible things happen, is because really smart people constantly are making unbelievably stupid choices. I also just think on like a life cycle sense, part of what made Alien and Aliens work so well is that it was so simple and straightforward. Here, there's so many moving parts where there's the worms, there's the goo, there's the transforming, melting zombie people, there's the bodybuilders, there's the xenomorph thing. Like, there's so many different things going on that it's not clear how it all ties together. And they try and make this statement about meeting our makers and our creators, and what if our creator hated us? And it just doesn't come together for me. Beautifully shot, some fun body horror and graphic nastiness here and there, but the script, I do not like it.
When I told you basically what the story was about, you could tell right away what worked and what did it. The Andy, Rain, that's what the movie's about.
Don't go off on a tangent. The more it connects, and you don't work against your own engine. You have an engine, don't lose it.
Number 12, It Chapter 2. Now, there are a number of things in this movie that I did really enjoy, but generally speaking, I thought this was a big disappointment and a huge step down from the first chapter, which is much higher up on this list. Now, on the positive, I thought they did a really good job in the casting, where you really feel like the actors that they picked to be the grown-up versions of the kids from the first movie, you believe it. They picked the right actors, whether they were the A-listers that are in there or the not-so A-listers in there, including the Old Spice guy. Here I am! Being one of them, which I absolutely love. There's sequences, there's individual moments that are just as effective as the first movie because you got the same creative team pulling these things off. But the story itself is not nearly as compelling, where the coming of age vibe of the first film had a really strong emotional anchor to it that was very relatable in this kind of fantastical situation. And it doesn't work so well with the now middle-aged versions of them trying to figure out where they're at in life. It just doesn't have the same emotional oomph to it. But more importantly, because they're going back knowing what they're heading towards, as they, remember all of it, the whole middle of the film, it's so cyclical, where a person goes to some place, they remember something from the past, and then they battle Pennywise. And then the next person goes to a place to find the thing, they remember the past, they battle Pennywise. It's so cyclical and repetitive. And then you get to the end of it, and the way that they defeat Pennywise, it feels so goofy. It doesn't play quite right. And so there's scenes, sequences, casting choices, performances that are really good, but the individual pieces are far greater than the whole. Number 11, World War Z. Point of reference, the 4 lower on this list, I would go negative on, It Chapter 2 is kind of like that. The rest of these movies I'm positive on. World War Z is just a little bit, it's good enough to give a recommendation to it. Now, this is an interesting one because this is an example of a movie based on a book where I actually did read the book 20 years ago when it first came out, but I didn't watch the movie until earlier this year. It came out when my son was 1 year old, recurring theme in the last few movies, a couple different movies I was interested in that I didn't see them when they first came out because my son Liam was born. And I just kind of never got around to seeing it despite liking zombie movies, Brad Pitt movies. I liked the idea of kind of this war version of it with a zombie invasion and these massive scale battles. And like I mentioned before, I've actually read the book and the movie. It's an interesting different spin on the zombie invasion genre. While I think missing some of the stuff that made the book compelling, the intrigue, the investigative parts to it. It's a movie that's also kind of fascinating because it was kind of a mess in its first cut. And it's an example of a film that was saved by reshoots, that they brought in someone to rewrite the entire last third of the movie. And then they reshot things extensively. They cut characters out. And because of that, they were able to salvage the film. And it was successful enough that it made its way into this video. And it looked like it was going to be a disaster. So sometimes reshoots save movies. But, there's a reason that it took me over 10 years to watch this movie, that it's good, but it's not that good. It's the most expensive zombie movie ever made, and it doesn't quite feel like the most interesting zombie movie ever made, or the most, inventive, or any of the things that you'd expect from making something the most expensive and biggest, flashiest version of it with a movie star. It never quite lives up to any of that, where it's like, it's a different spin. It's big, slick, glossy with a movie star at the head of it, so it's good. Kicking off our top 10, Beetlejuice, a movie that came out this year, and it debuted way overperforming, and then it's had fantastic legs where it's still raking in the dough 6 weeks later. They played this one really nicely with the release window and everything about it. As for the movie itself, I thought it was a solid follow-up. I'm not like a gigantic Beetlejuice fan. My actually primary reference for Beetlejuice growing up was the old animated show in the early 90s, and long-delayed sequels don't have the best track record, so I went into the movie a little bit nervous, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think it captures the chaotic energy of the original really nicely, and it has enough of kind of these clear plot points that you have forward momentum on the plot. You know what we're working towards. You see a threat kind of looming. And I kind of liked those elements of the film. Jenna Ortega, of course, is a great addition to the Tim Burton universe that is created here. Michael Keaton absolutely still has it. Now, there's way too many plot lines going on in this, and because of that, some of them feel like they've thrown on the back burner for a long time. Others are introduced way too late and resolved way too soon. There's some issues here, but overall, this thing was much better than I was expecting it to be, and much better than it might have turned out being. Number 9, I Am Legend. This is a film that I've always thought was well made. And if anything, it was too well done, because it's a film which is just so emotionally devastating and just lingers in such a dark place that I find it to be too unpleasant of a watch to be a film that I like to rewatch or explore additional times. And that's not because it's poorly done, it's because it's well done. That there's certain sequences in the movie that I have no desire to relive or re-experience. And the whole movie just, it sits in such a dark place that you go, I'm glad I saw that. Well done. And you were able to make a film that without needing to spend a lot of time with it, it sticks with you. You remember multiple memorable sequences. Will Smith at the peak of his game giving just this devastating, broken performance. So good, but one that I think it limits how much I want to spend time with. Number 8, Alien Romulus, another movie that came out this year. And as a point of reference, this movie and the rest of the movies on this list, I really enjoy. Some of them are some of my favorite films of all time. With Alien Romulus, I thought that this movie was just a great follow-up to the first 2 films in the franchise, where it pays so much attention to the details, the production design, the sound design, that it fits perfectly into that world that Ridley Scott and James Cameron created.
One part was obviously to nail the style and nail the sound of it, was to not only recreate, but even go and find the original tapes for the original movies and use those same tapes on our movie.
While still having the Fede Alvarez bag of tricks, where he's so good at putting people in these isolated environments, have this pressure cooker of intensity, and he does that with the world of Alien. He does that in space, where early on it establishes these rules, these different items and things like that. They're dangerous. And then the rest of the movie, he uses all those things set up to put our characters in danger, or use them as that mechanism by which they're able to survive these extreme scenarios. Not fully crazy about the last 10 minutes, the Prometheus elements that come into it. So coming out of the theater, wasn't crazy about that. But on rewatch, I punched my microphone, and that rewatch, I think, solidified that I enjoyed the overall experience definitely enough to thoroughly enjoy this movie. Number 7, The Conjuring 2, and I really enjoy the mainline Conjuring films, in particular the first 2 films directed by James Wan. And the thing that really makes them pop is the Warrens themselves, that they're based on real people and they treat them that way. They're not these big, flashy, flamboyant personalities. They feel like people that you would know. You buy into the dynamic in their relationship, and they're themselves skeptical. They don't go into each story believing everything inherently. They go in making sure, is this real, or are we being played? Is this person misunderstanding what's happening? And because the first film was this runaway success, this movie had a bigger budget. The scale and scope of the story is larger. And you feel that in the film, where there's this investigation into the Warrens, where they're not believed by outsiders, and they're trying to believe the story of this family, but there's reason to believe that maybe something fishy is going on here. And so it's able to continue to have the emotional hook, the believability of characters, that they don't feel like they're in a horror movie. They feel like real people, while having excellent James Wan atmosphere, transports you into the past, and of course the scares, the effects are bigger and better. So it has everything that I enjoyed about the first one, but even kind of more layers to it. Number 6, It. As a point of reference, I hadn't seen the 90s miniseries until after I watched this movie, and I've never read the book. So this film was really my introduction to Pennywise, the Losers Club, and this story in general. And I just thought it was really well done, where you have the Losers Club, this set of characters that each of them are fun and interesting in their own regard, but then you pull them together and they have great chemistry and a nice dynamic to them. And that gives the movie this emotional anchor to it, that it's set in, elements of this are set in a reality that we know and we can believe in. We know people like this, or we were like one of these characters, and they're off having these fun little adventures. And the adventures they happen to be having are in this fantastical environment with this killer clown. And so it can pull out big emotions, have satisfying resolutions. You can have emotional character arcs for each of these characters, and you can have a killer clown trying to make kids float. So it has all of those different ingredients. Of course, the other one you have to talk about here is Pennywise himself. I think Bill Skarsgård does just a great job of being so eerie, having a little bit of like this charm to him, but in the creepiest way possible, and just having this insane look to him, but also being fun and horrifying. It's a movie that's not afraid to kick things off with horrible things out of Georgie and setting everything in motion. And so just a movie that I thought was very effective on every single level, save for maybe some spotty CGI here and there. But just, I think it was incredibly well done. Number 5, A Quiet Place. I've always really enjoyed these kind of close quarters horror thrillers where people are stuck in a single environment trying to survive some threat. And that's what this movie does so well, by having a scenario where sound itself is the threat that will lead to death and danger. But the other side to it that works so well is that they create this scenario where in the opening scene, you and the characters in the movie are traumatized and the danger is so well established. And that lingers throughout the entire movie. Every interaction between the characters is shaped and formed by what happened in the opening sequence. And so it's a movie with like just very deep emotional ties that you care so much about these characters, not just their survival, but their relationships to one another and the restoration of that father-daughter bond that was so broken at the beginning of the film. And not because of anyone did something so horribly wrong, but because of the horrible tragedy of this scenario that they are in. And then just beyond that, the rules that they establish create this setup where as you go throughout the movie, there's all these little moments where it will pause to show you a nail turn up, pause to show you water running. And you immediately remember, oh, that's going to be a problem. It properly sets up all of the things in the first half of the movie. It sets up all these little things that become such enormous problems in the back half of the film. So it feels earned. And it feels like the audience is keeping up with the movie in a way that's the tension building version of like, oh crap. Oh no, don't step on, no, don't step there. And all of it just puts you on the edge of your seat so effectively because it's earned and because you care about the characters. Number 4, Signs. I know this movie has its critics, but I've always loved this movie. In a lot of ways, it's M. Night Shyamalan's most accessible film because it's an alien invasion movie that's a family drama with humor and, of course, tons of scares and thrills in it. It's got a top-notch cast here. It was basically the last big hit film that Mel Gibson starred in before he kind of moved in other directions and fell from Hollywood's good A-list, if you want to call it that way. It was on the upswing for Joaquin Phoenix. You have a Culkin in there. And of course, they're all great. It's a movie that, is known for the alien invasion stuff, but there's like a steady stream of solid humor in the film. It's a movie that has one of the most famous and best jump scares in cinematic history with the party footage scene. But the thing that really elevates it to me is that it has a great emotional hook to it, where it's a film about a man who's trying to process the fact that there's an alien invasion taking place while he's still processing the death of his wife in what he believes in. It kind of intertwines these ideas and these themes together so well. And I think it has an amazing crescendo in the third act, but I think it just crescendos so nicely in such a profound way. That's an exciting conclusion while also fulfilling all of these character arcs, thematically, all of it in one sequence so well. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the movies. As I said at the beginning, we're not going to agree on our definition of horror. That's fine. I'm not really interested in debating what qualifies in horror here. I'm much more interested in talking about the movies that are included, or if you want to throw another one in there that made a lot of money, sure, go ahead and do that. Let's talk about movies. Let's not debate the definition of horror. Also, if you like my content and want to hear my thoughts on more horror movies, you can check out this playlist right over here with all of my rankings of all of the iconic horror franchises out there. In third place, The Exorcist. The original, the classic possession film that essentially is the standard by which all possession films have been evaluated for the last 50 years. It might have come out over 50 years ago now, but it's still one of the ballsiest and most shocking possession films ever made, where you watch this innocent little girl, very normal girl, slowly get worse and worse, and it gets more and more twisted, and it has her do things, it shows things, she says things that 50 years later are still shocking. They're still controversial. There's still things that Hollywood does not like to put in movies, and it makes people uncomfortable because that's just how extreme this movie was, and it came out 50 years ago. The director here, William Friedkin, his previous film was The French Connection, which won Best Picture, and he won Best Director. And so they brought in this director of incredible prestige to make this film. And that's what you feel when you're watching this movie, that it wasn't just like so many horror movies these days. They're movies that they know studios know people will buy tickets for them. It's like the starting place for them. So they do them lower budget with newer talent, or like they just kind of take for granted that people will buy tickets for them. The Exorcist, they went, we want to do this right. We're going to get the best talent to bring this story to life. And while it's superficially about this girl being possessed in the exorcism that takes place, really, it's about this priest and his faith. Like, it's about something very human. And what do you believe? Why do you believe it? Do you believe in the power of God? And so, like, all of those elements are what just elevate this film and why it has stood the test of time. And while so many movies have tried to copy it, none have surpassed it. Our runner-up, The Sixth Sense, the movie that really put M. Night Shyamalan on the map and kickstarted this 3-movie run where I think he put out 3 absolutely fantastic films in a row. And in the case of The Sixth Sense, it's a movie that I think it's a great story about regret. It's very deliberately paced, and a movie where there's so much attention to details, so much attention to the smallest little things. All of it being this character study. It works as a character study about Bruce Willis's character who's dealing with his failures of the past and trying to redeem himself by helping this boy. It works on that level, just that story itself. And then the twist happens, which causes you to reevaluate everything that you've seen and gives everything more meaning. It's a twist done right, where the film works and makes sense if the twist doesn't happen. And then you rewatch the movie with the knowledge of the twist, and everything makes so much more sense. It's logically consistent before and after the twist, and it has every interaction has new, deeper meanings in light of everything you experience. So it's just such a great concept, written and executed to perfection. But coming in at number 1, Jaws. Now, Steven Spielberg is my favorite director of all time and has been for a very long time, but somehow I'd never seen Jaws until I met my wife, and this is her favorite movie of all time. So my wife is actually the person that introduced me to the Spielberg classic Jaws, horror out at the open sea, and the movie that essentially invented the blockbuster. By today's standards, it might feel slow and quaint, but it's so well done that You actually care about the characters, you care about this town, and it slowly builds the tension. For a movie that can be a lot of fun, it also has a scene where a small child is killed in front of his mother with a crowd of people all around watching. And it just shows that happen. And there's people debate, is it a horror movie? What's more horrifying than a child at the beach having a wonderful day being eaten alive by a shark with the mother watching? It's horrifying on so many levels. It doesn't feel sensational. It just feels tragic. And it causes a scenario where our lead character feels responsible. So it's horrifying, but you also have all these great character moments. And then as you move into the back half of the film, there's this trio of great characters, each of them representing a different perspective of the danger of the shark.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
And so a movie that just works on so many different levels. It can be fun, it can be funny, it can be horrifying, it can be thrilling, and it can be emotional. So for me, this is the best one on the list, and it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I've got more like it. You can check out that playlist right over there. If you enjoyed this video, almost certainly there's something else in there that you will enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.